feel like I'm famous now.
Well, that's my hope. That's my hope. That's all. Well, Brian, thank you so much for helping my project. I know it's late at night and a whole bunch of other things.
It's like 8:30. I think we're good.
It's 8:30. I don't know. And then, like, I'm taking down the minutes to the mini sim in the morning.
Fair enough.
But I guess first off, thank you for helping my project.
No problem.
And could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Brian. I'm a Rhode Island transplant, so I say things like bubbler and more used to the cold in Texas. And I'm an instructor at NASA and your colleague.
Absolutely. And you were on the you don't remember this, but it was a big deal for me. But you were on the panel of people that interviewed me.
Yes.
For my technical presentation and
Yep.
that type of thing. So
Guess I gave you a thumbs up. So.
it turned out well. I'm glad it turned out the way it did.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, you're not only space is your career. You've also done things like gone and lived at high seas, and you also did like the international space masters program. I forget the precise name of it.
Yeah, ISU, International Space University. I went to. So I did a space studies program there over in Strasbourg, France. And then you're right, I did 8-month mission in high seas where we basically lived in a isolated little pod for 8 months.
So I mean, it's not too much to say that you like live and breathe space. I mean, you even have a YouTube channel where you put together really kind of interesting, quirky, fun, educational space videos. But I was wondering if you could kind of take me back in the beginning of time to when you first remember having any interest in space.
Oh, that's interesting. It was actually pretty late, so I'm not one of those kids that grew up going to space camp or whatever. I was actually in college going, what am I really going to do when I'm out of here? There's nothing that's really kind of pulling me in. And then I saw this, I don't know, it was just a website somewhere talking about astronauts and how most astronauts were engineers. And I was like, that looks cool. One thing led to another. I started pursuing internships, got an internship, and then just totally fell in love with this idea. Because before that, my thing was all about traveling and going exploring. I like to be the person that's going out and finding things, which aligns well with the whole astronaut thing, right? That's just like an actual profession. After that first internship, I got hooked, kind of meeting the astronauts, understanding a little bit more about kind of the Apollo program and programs that came before. And ever since then, I just started pursuing it quite a bit.
So literally, you just stumbled upon it in college?
Yeah. It was like junior year of college or something like that. It was quite late in my college career. Because in Rhode Island, there's no aerospace really. Everybody who graduates there goes to work on submarines.
Well, the funny thing you say that. So Brown University is in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And
that's right. There's Space Grant University.
Yeah.
Right.
And I remember like every year, what is it? The Lunar and Planetary Institute (LPI) here in Houston has like their big conference in the Woodlands. That's like a week long.
Yeah.
And there was this guy from Brown who ran like this micro symposium that happened like the weekend before that, and it was open to the public. I got to go to that, so it's like,
oh, cool.
It seemed like
one of my friends, one of my high seas crew members that I stayed with, they did their PhD at Brown, and they would come here exactly for that conference.
And,
so that makes sense.
So, okay, do you remember kind of like was this like a job listing among a whole bunch of other job listings? I mean, were you literally like just going, what am I going to do I get out of college? And
as far as the job that I have now, or just in general being interested in space?
Being interested in space.
It was as simple as seeing that astronaut is a profession.
Oh, really?
And going, wow, that's cool. I'd like to pursue that. And then that led to an internship, which then led to just getting a feel for what it actually was like. It was like eye candy. You go there and you're seeing rovers and these robotics and where the astronauts are training, and you're hearing these stories, and all of it just kind of sucked me into it.
That's amazing. Yeah. But before that, you didn't see like science fiction, and you didn't see like.
I mean, I watched like Star Wars and different sci-fi things, but it never occurred to me that that was a real life thing, right? Like it's you're kind of shielded from it. Maybe you see the space shuttle launch and things like that, but it didn't really kind of click until it was like I saw it as like a career, a possibility of something that anybody could pursue, that I could pursue.
And that first internship, that was here in Houston or someplace else?
That was here in Houston.
Here in Houston, at Johnson Space Center.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And what was that like? I mean, do you remember like the first time you came on campus and what you felt?
Yeah, I remember thinking, first of all, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to NASA, right? Because the only concept of that I had was the movies where, it's just like something's going terribly wrong, call NASA. And now I know if there's like something terribly wrong, don't call us.
Oh, really?
We're probably not going to be able to help.
I don't know, the IT help
No.
is like really quick.
No, but it's like everything, it's just like this giant, I don't know, some aliens are coming from outer space. I guess we would probably be one of the best people to call, but there's only so much you can do. And so I remember thinking that it was going to be like all futuristic, like the sci-fi movies, and then it was just like aging, crumbling buildings.
I know, the buildings are not sci-fi.
I was like, that is not what I expected. But it was still amazing. Like, it was amazing to be there. It almost didn't feel real to be there. But yeah, my memories really, again, it's just a lot of, meeting crew members. Also just, we were young. There was people, coming into the internships from all over the country, all over the place. And that was an amazing experience. I mean, like, meeting friends that, I'm still friends with. One of which introduced me to my future wife.
That's awesome.
So, a lot of fun, good memories there, yeah.
So, at what point did us going to the moon really become real for you? Or is it real now? Maybe that's not a good question.
Do you mean like having gone on the moon before, or like going to the moon?
Going again.
Going again.
Like obviously we had the Constellation program following Columbia.
Yeah.
And it's an attempt to have a moon base literally in operation by about 4 or 5 years at this point in time, which we're not there. You had like the whole initiative in the late 1980s and early 1990s of trying to get back and beyond low Earth orbit and stuff like that. And all those times it didn't seem to be anything more than like PowerPoints. But this time we've actually tested the craft going around the moon.
Yeah. And
it feels very real. It feels like we were literally on the cusp of doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, it became real when I first started this project back in 2019. I was kind of curious, at what point did you're like, oh, we're going back to the moon and we're really doing it?
For me was when Artemis 1 launched.
Okay.
And that mission happened, because like when I interned here, and for a couple internships, it was still, the Constellation program was still happening, just like you were saying. We're going to go back to the moon, and they were working on habitats and all that stuff. And one of my first internships was working on the habitat, they called it a habitat demonstration unit. So basically, they were doing a test bed for what are these houses on the moon going to look like.
And you were here for a Constellation?
Yeah.
When did you first come to? I didn't realize you were here that long.
2012, I
Okay.
think. No, actually, even earlier. It might have been 2009 was the first one. I came back a bunch of times, like separated by years, like in my college career.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, so I kind of like saw it get canceled, saw them go through, talking through using Orion for an ARM mission, the asteroid redirect mission, and then, so I just kind of saw a lot of the tempo of like, start a big program, gets canceled, program veers this way, program veers that way, and Artemis was going on for a while, after that too. But it wasn't until there was like an actual vehicle launching, circling the moon, people were flying it was like, oh, this is happening, like this is the thing now. It finally felt real. Yeah.
Yeah, I should see it.
I almost like need to see it in front of me before I'm like, because before that it's just like bets are always off. It's like there's gonna get delays and delays and delays, and maybe I don't know, a new administration comes in, cuts the program, says we're gonna go in this new direction. You just never really know, because it's kind of tumultuous in that way.
Now, I've been interviewing people at Starbucks on the street, people who get the lucky seat next to me on the plane. In fact, I interviewed Mr. Tanaka on the plane. I was like, it was about the same time now, but I'm like stuck on the plane. We're going to land after midnight. I'm like, this better work. But most of the people I talked to have no clue we're going back to the moon. And I was wondering if this lines up with your experience and sort of your perception of things, or do you think maybe I'm just unlucky and talking to all the wrong people?
No, I think that's right. And I guess I'm not asking people every day, right? But I get that impression. I mean, even watching, I was watching a podcast recently where they're like, if we had a moon program, and I was like, we do have a moon program, Yeah, I think there's always a bit of a disconnect with space. I think there's a lot more interest in it now than there used to be. I think it used to be a lot more kind of niche, like you were into space, you were a NASA kid, and you got patches and stickers and stuff or whatever, or NASA adult. I think now with kind of commercial space blowing up, I get a sense that there's more people interested because there's more going on, and there have been, there's been like an effort to make it cool in some way, whether it's intentional or not. Like SpaceX, when they were first starting, posting rockets exploding, going, look at this, boom, like that'd be unheard of. You'd never see like a government program be like, hey, look at our thing fail. Like it's just not realistic. So I think it's getting better. Whether people know we're going back to the moon, I don't know. I still think there's a lot of people that don't know or maybe don't feel that it's important. So,
But you talk about don't feel it's important. What in your mind about us going back to the moon should make it feel important to a broader community?
I think that a lot of times we'll try to justify going to the moon or any kind of space exploration with a lot of we try to find practical reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So we say because this thing that was invented for a spacecraft is now in an NFL helmet, and there's like a big disconnect there, and it's like it's okay, it's cool, but it's also or like we're gonna mine the moon, and there's this kind of thing there that's gonna give us a lot of energy, and it's gonna solve this big problem. But I think the answer is much more like maybe it's a little cheesy, a little like kind of poetic, I guess. But I think like we all have like these questions like, are we alone in the universe? Why do we exist? Is there a higher power, a higher being? And like we're sitting on this like one tiny planet with like billions and billions of other like literal worlds, like just billions of worlds just sitting out there. And my thing is like, well, if we want to know the answer, like we got to go look, like just go look. It's the equivalent of like if I never left my house and it was just like, what's in Japan? Like, I don't know. Like why would I go there? I gotta go to work tomorrow. And it's like, but there's this grand adventure to be had. And so I think just trying to answer questions that are inherent to being a human being is the reason we should go out. Now, whether we should go to the moon or somewhere else, then that's like a different, logistical question. But,
You said something that I found to be very ironic, and I'd like to explore it just a little bit. You said we try to justify going to space in practical terms, and then the example you gave
very practical
was that we discovered this material that we could use, or this camera that we could use in a NFL helmet.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing is, what's practical about the NFL are the helmets. I mean, essentially, that's entertainment, right?
Well, when I'm getting at that, it's like the NASA spin-offs, right? And like
sure.
NASA puts out this, booklet, or it used to be a booklet, I guess. I'm sure it's probably just digital now, where, it's all the technologies that have been taken from spaceflight and going, hey, this tiny little fuel line was used to make artificial hearts for young children. And so there's some like amazing stuff in there. It's just like I don't know that people see that direct translation. Like that's a hard thing. I think it's cool and I buy into it, right?
Sure.
But it's kind of hard for them to see. Well, how does can't we just do that without the spaceship, right? And like,
Yeah, I mean,
You
somebody
know,
said
that's
we got
nice.
all these like cool computers out of the space program. They're like, well, if you want to make cool computers, go make cool computers. Why
Yeah.
do you why
Yeah.
do you need to
And
send?
so I think that's the
yeah.
argument. Yeah. So
But I mean, the NFL, it's something that entertains a certain segment of people. You don't need to ask them if they don't need to justify the NFL in terms of its impact on the rest of society. You know, like we learn how to dodge each other better. Okay, we learn how to throw balls, which could be useful because you never know when you're gonna have that baby on the third floor and how you're gonna safely throw the
There you
ball.
go.
You know, nobody's like justifying the NFL and those things, and it seems that the NFL is worthwhile just because it entertains a certain number of people.
mm.
And so, you know, what do you think about the thought that space exploration, even if it was just entertainment, inspiration, excitement, that if it did that for enough people, that in itself would be worthy of doing it. Like it doesn't necessarily need to accomplish anything if
That's interesting.
people like doing it. You know, it's like art projects. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, just for the and I think the to some degree that is what excites me. It's the sake of going out and exploring and trying to find new things and just being able to accomplish something that's incredible, right? It's like the equivalent of like climbing Everest. You're not really going. There's no, it's no shopping mall on top of Everest, or whatever. Like you're not trying
Right, I mean, it
to
could
get
be.
to a place. It's the journey, so to speak, right? So, yeah, I think that is part of it. I think I forgot the your question there. Yeah, just like, is that reason enough? Sure. I mean, I think so. But it's nice if we're trying to find something. I think just the search for life, trying to find life on other planets, that's pretty incredible. Putting people, I think, humans actually on other planets, I think is very inspirational and kind of shows something. I think that has a lot of power in that way. There's a reason people remember the moon landing, right?
Mhm.
They don't talk about every Apollo mission. Most people probably can't tell you what happened on, Apollo 14, Apollo 15, right? But, one small step for man, everybody knows that, right? There's something about that first time that does it. But I also, I'm sympathetic to people who aren't necessarily into it. To some degree, I'm like, it can be frustrating because I'm like, how do you not see how amazing this is? Especially now when everything's changing, right? There's like more ways to fly in space. There's like tons of companies coming up to try and fly in space, trying to make space stations. It's becoming more and more kind of common, and it's just going to explode in the next like 10, 20 years. And I'm like, you're missing this crazy thing is happening, and you're just totally ignoring it. On the other hand, I got people who are super into football, and I could watch a game, but I don't get it. I'll watch grown men throw like a ball around. And be like, he caught it 17 times this year. Like, who cares, dude? I got stuff to do. so there's I get it. So other people like, what do you mean you don't like football? You don't like football. You don't like sports. So I think it's just the same. It's just it's whatever you're into.
It's whatever. Yeah. I mean, even among people who are really into a sport, you could go and show them a different sport, and it's very likely they would be just as uninterested in that.
Yeah.
Because that's just not what they're into, type thing. Okay, so talking about spin-offs. So here's a question for you, and then we kind of touched upon it, but just kind of want to tease it out a little bit. Do we explore to innovate, or do we innovate to explore?
Do we explore to innovate, or do we innovate to explore? I think we innovate to explore, and then exploring leads to innovation just by chance. Not by chance, by the nature of innovation. I don't know, you know what I mean?
Sure.
You have to figure out how to survive in this environment that's totally not meant for your biology, and everything's trying to kill you all the time. And in creating those things, you have to get creative. You're forced to invent, and then you can use those things in other applications. But
the mother of invention is necessity type of thing.
yeah, Yeah, exactly. You can put, all right, I got a suit that I need to be able to breathe, give me atmosphere, give me all the things I need to sustain life and protect me from the outside environment. All right, cool. Can we put that in the water? Hey, we got twofer, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's as simple as that.
Can we put that on a person that's about to run into a burning building that's filled
Yeah.
with carbon dioxide
Yeah.
and monoxide, a whole bunch of things, or
Yeah.
a nuclear power plant that's overheating or whatever.
Yep, exactly. So,
So just coming back to sports a little bit, I think one thing that makes sports exciting to some people is that the outcome is undetermined. Like, you don't know how it's going to go. And sometimes you think it's going to go one way, you have an upset, and you're like, whoa, it went this other way. In space exploration, especially when it comes to human space exploration, we do everything to make it very predictable. Watch this astronaut perform this action that he's done thousands of times in the safest environment in this extremely safe and slow way, and and it's like you're almost taken out. I mean, like, the whole job of everybody that's supporting the astronauts and the astronauts themselves is to basically remove all this uncertainty, and in so doing, perhaps a little bit of the sort of interest and excitement that would normally be in something like that, in like a sports, you also remove a bit of that. And I was just wondering, A, do you think there's some, like, is that a valid analysis? And then B, is there a way to add some of that excitement from uncertainty while maintaining safety?
yeah, I was going to say, you don't want to add uncertainty.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but, or not in terms of safety.
Not in terms of safety.
Not in
I mean,
terms
the
of
astronauts should be safe.
Yeah.
That goes without question. But is there a way to keep them safe and still make it a lot more interesting?
Sure. I mean, but first of all, I think your concept is correct, right? Even just the idea of, like, there's an element of danger, right? Like, people watch, like, rocket launches. There's kind of an element of there's fire and things that could go wrong, right? And there's always, like, things that could go wrong, but we don't necessarily, like, see it that way when they're just, like, conducting research on a space station. So I think so. Ways to make it more exciting. That's a good question. I'm trying to think of particular examples. I mean, I think doing new things is exciting, right? Like Polaris Dawn, doing a first commercial EVA. That's exciting. Flying around the moon is exciting. But I don't know how you, like, I wonder, the next moon landing, is that going to have the same coverage as the previous moon landing? Because I have the New York Times newspaper. They have a section there that every single page is moon, and just different aspects about it. And I just wonder, like, is it going to get that coverage, or is it going to be a couple days and just totally fizzle out like everything else? I don't know.
Well, and
Totally just veered around your question there, but
well, almost you ran straight into it, right? Because the big question around the time that we went to the moon was, will we get there first? And so there was that uncertainty aspect of it. Would the Russians beat us? Would we get there, before they did? And now you sort of have the same thing going with China. I mean, China just had an event this week where they're like, hey, these are our spacesuits. We plan to walk on the moon in 2030, which is kind of neat because it was like they're on the path to actually achieving that time frame, and that they have a lot more commitment to doing that for national pride and kind of I mean, they built a space station, they've landed. I mean, they did a sample return mission from the moon, which basically is a human lunar mission in micro, right? I mean, you just got to scale it up.
All the components.
You've got all the components. You just have to scale it up, and you're there. Do you think China going to the moon maybe creates that excitement?
Not as much as I would have thought. And maybe that part of that is because it's not really pushed in that way. Like, there's kind of like, oh, look, China unveiled this thing, they could be first, and that's kind of it. And this usually articles kind of on mostly space news websites, maybe, a news thing here and there. I get the impression it's not like the average person is not going to care as much. And I'm not sure that that's going to stay true. And I'm not sure that's much different than the 60s. Like, it's hard to know because I wasn't alive then. So you're just going based off of like what you're taught in newsreels and stuff. But I get the impression that back then that was much more kind of integrated in the culture because you had the Cold War, you had kind of a lot of the like fear with Sputnik, and I could see like once this is actually impacting your everyday life, and there's this like idea of like a threat, like a real threat in the sky, right? Versus like, okay, they're gonna get there first. What does that mean for me? If you're the average person, you're like, who cares who gets there? You know, like what are they gonna do? Like set up a Burger King? Like what am I worried about? Like what am I worried about as like just a normal person sitting here? So I get that, and maybe that, you know, it's not saying the big picture or whatever, but I'm just trying to think like in a common person, like, do they really care who's on the moon? I'm not sure they do right now, you know? I'm not sure they see that as a giant, oh my gosh, China's on the moon first. It's just like...
And a lot of people respond back and, hey, we landed in 1969. Glad they finally called up.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah. No, that's a whole other thing. But, yeah.
Or, you know, if that's what they want to spend their money on, good for them.
Yeah, and I think that's how people view it. It's like, we've been there, we've done that. All right, they're doing something else, but... Sure, but of course, you know, like it misses the picture of, you know, the goal being more about setting up more of a permanent location and so on and so forth.
But is it more of a failure of the imagination, a disbelief in the future of humanity that really drives this? Because the way China talks about the moon is the same way they talk about the South China Sea, as being like the strategic kind of place that you want to be at and operate at and essentially control. And from their standpoint, they're thinking, you know, Mars, the rest of the solar system, you know, I mean, I watched this Netflix show that was a Chinese show that was, you know, dubbed called Wandering Earth, right? Where they actually, you know, the sun's going to explode and, you know, they're actually moving the Earth away from the solar system. You know, I mean, people that dream at that level have a bigger, I mean, they seem, I mean, conquer the moon makes sense, right? But if you're a people that are like, oh, we just need to, you know, keep the immigrants out, and we need to make sure we pay low taxes and make sure there's no government regulation, and you know, other countries should pay for their own defense, and I should be able to live the same way that people lived 400 years ago, but with all the comforts of modern life. You know, something like that. You know, you seem like more internal focus, like you like have like the shelter mentality as opposed to this the universe is our oyster mentality. And it feels like, you know, if you look, you know, in the 1960s and 70s, I mean, we had like Vietnam going on, presidential assassinations, race riots, you know, just economic depression. And at the same token, there seemed to be like some optimism, you know, of that period of, you know, invented a microwave and we're going to the moon and, you know,
Yeah.
all these other things. But it's like you don't, I mean, I don't feel that same level of optimism in society that I think may have been there in like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, that's a hard one to really know too, right? And that's why I'm not really sure, because even that, like, I think when the original moon landing was presented, it's always this like big inspirational thing that our country all rally together and like yeah, I'm sure that's true to some degree, but there were plenty of people protesting spending money on going to the moon. They're like, why are we spending billions of dollars when we have all the things that you talked about going on?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's always the case. Why are we putting money there? I see, you know, tons of poverty around. People are, you know, life is getting harder for people. Things are getting more expensive. There are lots of issues that we could redirect those funds there, right? Like that's a sentiment that a normal person that's not pursuing a space industry, you know, career can think. I'm not sure that's so much different. I think to some degree that's just always kind of been the case. Anytime you have any kind of tax-funded thing, I think that's just part of the deal. I'm trying to think how, if I think the sentiment is different. I think I agree with you that it's a little more negative in terms of like the getting back to the moon. Part of that is because, might have to do with the fact that there's like kind of a mixed structure now. It's like part commercial, part government, who's doing it better, and like, and maybe people are, I don't think people see it as like a collaborative thing. It's more like these two separate things. If anything, maybe there's some degree that hurts us there, right? Where they go, like, these commercial companies are crushing it. Why do we even need to be putting tax money into this, right? Like, so, yeah, it's more complicated now in some ways.
Well, and back during the first Trump administration, before Artemis got announced, Newt Gingrich, who used to be Speaker of the House, and actually proposed a bill that said that once there's like 50,000 people on the moon, U.S. citizens, then it should become like a state. So it was like really big in his face. But one of the things that he was floating around the administration at that time was, instead of having a big Apollo-like program, actually have give out a prize. So like, I'm not sure what numbers he was thinking of. It would have to be significant for the private sector to actually invest that. But I mean, what if you like say first person on the moon, here's $25 billion. You get somebody to the moon safely and back, $25 billion. Don't care how you do it. Go after it. You have to go raise all the money, and everything. And you have to go develop the rockets and train the people and make it happen. And then you're only, like, taxpayer money is only being paid for success. And you no longer have like people getting paid for sort of the process, but for the end goal. And I was just wondering what you thought about that system versus the one we had, if it would be, what the pros and cons are.
I don't know. Is that much different than like a fixed price contract? Like where you have a particular metric you're supposed to hit, and we're only going to give you a finite amount of money, and good luck. If it costs you more or whatever, then that's on you. I mean, how is that different other than just having more of a payment right at the end, right?
Yeah, I guess it's not different than a fixed price contract, and maybe this is the way fixed price contracts are used right now, they're for kind of like sub services as opposed to the overall umbrella thing. So you're getting a little bit of optimization on like these little processes, but the overall program is still huge and not all like fixed price. So maybe what it is about taking that whole concept of fixed price and expanding it to the program overall, instead of, and then and basically also you're letting the private sector do all the management and everything, and you're just, you define a goal, sort of like an X prize type thing. You define the goal, you put a big enough prize out there, and let the market organize itself to try to achieve that goal. So that's kind of like the thing.
I think it's an interesting idea. I'd have to think about that more. I don't know if I have any strong feelings one way or another on it, to be honest.
I mean, one thing also from, creating a government agency to go out and do something versus having a government grant. One is temporary in time and has a very definite end date, right? At some point that money is granted to somebody because of that. Whereas you go off and create this agency, now the agency, has a reason, and like its reason is not necessarily to do what it was originally, created to do. Its reason is just to maintain itself. Like that becomes like maybe the largest part of its purpose.
That's interesting. And that triggered a thought of after kind of the Apollo program came to an end, there was a lot of discussion on what NASA would become. Like there wasn't a sense that NASA would just keep doing the things they had tossed around proposals, for example, of like maybe they would just handle, different, civil issues, right? Like maybe construction or whatever, like we have this big problem in the US, we have this giant think tank, they would just be this like organization. You kind of point towards your problems rather than remain in space. And it's kind of interesting. Like it could have been that it just we're like, okay, we're done with space now. You go do something else now. So the option of NASA or any organization transforming and becoming something different is always on the table.
Well, it was kind of funny. I mean, Johnson Space Center is on land that once belonged to Rice University, and Rice is like, hey, you need to build it out so it could become a secondary Rice campus.
Yeah.
Because after we get to the
Just in
moon,
case,
we might
yeah.
get it back. I think there was like a real thought that, you make it to the moon, come back, wind down the program, because
Yeah.
you achieved the goals.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thinking about the future, whenever you think about 200 years out in the future, so this is like, I mean, maybe you live that long. I hope that works out well. But that might be your great grandchildren. I'm not sure how many greats there are, but they're really exceptionally great. What do you think the world's like for them?
That's interesting.
Oh,
Hold that thought so I can get rid of the background noise.
okay.
Okay. Ta-da. 200 years in the future. What is life like? No idea.
And I don't want to make it a question or prediction, because that's too much of trying to put in. What do you hope it's like? Like, what if you could shape the path between now and 200 years? Where would you like for us to end up?
That's the right question, right? So we had a professor. What was the his official title? It was something along the lines of futurism, like professor of futurism. I forget the actual term. And there was a sense of like past like 50 years, you're never going to predict the direction things go. But really the focus of the study was that these people would go in and ask exactly that. What do you want to design? What do you want your future to be? And then you're kind of designing and try to focus your energies that way. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. He had a saying that I really liked, which was, we build our tools and then our tools shape us. I think that's very true, right? Like we design the cell phone or internet, whatever, like this is really cool. And then suddenly it's got this force feedback into how we behave and issues that we have and strengths that we have, new abilities that we have. I guess my hope is that we learn to attempt to we figure out how we can focus on the positives of technology rather than just the pure profit machines that end up just a lot of times leaning towards the negative. For example, like with the internet, monetizing just like eyeballs and attention, right? For like ads, driving people to like, intentionally designing things to be addictive, where it could be more so a tool for learning, right? It's all of those things, but it'd be nice if we could figure out a way to incentivize things in a more positive manner and less in the things that are bad for individuals. And so looking forward, I would think things like artificial intelligence, right? Like, you always hear the positives, right? That's what's sold the positives. Well, these things can help diagnose disease and figure out all these complex problems without any of the issues, right? But like, how is that actually implemented? Is it, okay, I can figure out this disease, but nobody can afford it? Because then it doesn't matter, or is it just going to put, a bunch of people out of jobs? Is it, is it actually improving our lives? And is it accessible? So I hope that we can make those types of things accessible. Technology can be as amazing as possible, but if it's gate kept so the average person can't actually use it, and it's actually doing more harm than good, and every technology is like that, right? And I just hope that we can get more towards the good than the bad.
It's kind of funny. You think about societies that kind of have uncontrolled technological development, And then you think about societies that are very, very selective on what technologies they allow into their societies, like Amish, for example. I mean, there's lots of technological choices they decide to skip because they felt like it would change their way of interacting between themselves too much. And just kind of, do the people in situations where you have unlimited choice actually have choice, or is it like some type of prevailing culture that's being forced on them?
Sure.
I mean, the expectation is everybody carries a cell phone.
Yeah.
You really don't have a choice not to carry a cell phone at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, to do banking or whatever, you have to get a text to your phone, or exactly. It just becomes almost impossible to avoid, or you become this like weird outsider that has to go through 10 other steps. And
like you have to have an email address. You have to. I mean, there's like a list of things that you're just expected. You have to have a mailing address. And,
So, and to some degree, I think you have to change with the times. It's just, I guess my hope is just that those types of things start being used more positively, I guess.
In 200 years, do you think we have people living on Mars?
200 years is pretty far out. Living on Mars, I don't know. I don't know.
What makes you think that? Well, okay, a better question. Do you think there's at some point in the future where we do have people living on Mars? Is it just a question of time, or is it a question of
I mean, I hope so. I hope we're able to expand and go further out. Mars specifically, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I guess we have to have a good reason for staying around that long.
Well, and why do we even need planets? If you can build huge space structures and put them wherever you want, then you could put them in medium Earth orbit, and it's a lot easier to get to, and you load it up with people, and then you can move it wherever you want. It could be like a huge cruise ship kind of doing the visiting, and at some point it's like, hey, why don't we go over to the next star system, won't be able to get there until your great-great-grandchildren are here, but hopefully they're appreciative.
No, I hope so. I hope we can get there. I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be, can we take care of our home planet here?
Mm-hmm.
Can we sustain ourselves and also, produce the resources and the energy to go out there and figure out all the problems, right? So I think we're well within the capability to get people to Mars. I think we'll figure all that out and work through the problems. I think if we wanted to put somebody there, sooner than later we'd figure out how to do it. And if we put the money and energy into it, I think we'd get there. There's already a lot of people talking about it and thinking about it. But it'll be interesting to see, is it still primarily going to be kind of, researchers and government-funded individuals going and staying for long periods of time? Or does that become kind of a really open to everyday people? Or, is there really going to be a desire for many people to go?
Talking about desire, if you could take a trip to space, would you?
Absolutely.
How far would you consider going?
I don't know. What are my options?
You have low Earth orbit. You have to the moon and back. You have colonize Mars, and you have a generational voyage to another star system.
Oh, interesting. All right. Of those choices, to the moon and back.
Okay.
I want to come back. No one-way trip for me. I like the go and return. So
you want to be able to tell people about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't even like going to the movies by myself. I gotta share everything with with my fiance. So I want to be able to see her. Even like a Mars trip there and back, I'd consider it.
But
under the
it's
right circumstances. But
colonizing Mars, what you're like.
No.
Yeah.
No, it'd be cool to visit, but it's it's like Vegas. You go once. It's cool to visit. You don't want to live there.
Absolutely.
Nobody actually lives there. I don't know. yeah, it's nice to be able to just breathe the air and survive. And the Earth is beautiful. It's like,
It's amazing.
easily my favorite planet so far.
Easily.
All kinds of variety, life everywhere, alien-like creatures running around everywhere. You got all kinds of cool-looking insects and bugs, and there's a lot to appreciate here. So we need to go out, but we need to take care of the Earth as well.
Well, Brian, that's pretty much all the questions I had for you. Did you have any questions for me or anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get around to?
Interesting. That's such a fun question. I'll think of a question for you, but on things that we haven't talked about, I think one thing that's really important and that I hope to get out in whatever way I can, maybe through the YouTube channel, is how many aspects of space flight there are outside of the science and engineering. Because I think that's a big thing, right? People just think it's just like the math and engineers and the guys with little, pocket protectors or whatever and the black ties from back in the day. But there are topics, where people are studying, the ethics of space flight. How do we ethically explore space? How do you take different religious traditions up to space? Space flight, space centers and developing countries, and what are they doing and what kind of unique application they have. There is so much going on, and has been for the last 10-50 years, but all you really see is NASA, SpaceX, but there's this whole other world going on, and room for people outside of the space industry, outside of the technical fields. I think that's important for people to know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, any large organization needs a certain set of capabilities. I mean, you gotta have HR, you have to have accounting, you need to have managers, and you need to, have people to maintain the systems that the people need to use, like the offices and the computer systems, and
but even that, accounting, HR, nobody's excited to work in HR, right? But the idea of the Dare Moon project, and they're going to send filmmakers around the moon. Mm-hmm. Well, that got canceled, but but even at NASA, right? We have people that work in film and editing, and there's just so much going on, and there's opportunities for people. So many of the people that I went to school with at ISU, they went to that college, and then they went to go work in Japan, mm-hmm. or they went to go work, in India on the Indian space program. There's the India space program in general that doesn't get a lot of attention. They have one of the biggest ones in the world, and they're incredibly successful. There's just so much you can be in space and travel around the world, and there's just so much more to it than just the 2 or 3 things that we see all the time in the news.
Yeah, about astronauts taking different vehicles up versus down on the space station, for example.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that too. It's learning to kind of really listen to, reading between the lines on what's going on, I guess. Or maybe not reading between the lines, but anytime something's happening in space, there's these big headlines, right? And this culture of just all right, we're just gonna crap on this thing, or we're going to say how amazing this is. But then if you actually take time to listen to the press conferences, things like that, you'll actually get a sense for these are the conversations that are actually happening that lead to this decision, right? It's not I don't know, this person's a dummy or this person's a genius. It's never, things are never that cut and dry. It's there's all these conversations happening, and the information is there. I just sometimes it doesn't make it to the headline. So you got to dig for it.
Yeah, or it makes it to a fragmented way. I mean, was NASA considering doing this 6 months ago? Yes, but that was just one guy who wrote down on a piece of paper, and it didn't really circulate it, and it didn't really seem like the best option at times, and nobody thought it was credible. But was there that one guy? Yes, there was that one guy, but that doesn't mean, it's we go through so many different options and kind of toss around so much, and it's just you don't want to do that necessarily in public, right? Yeah. Because only fragments of it, and people start getting spun up on this or that. You want to kind of figure out what you're going to do, and then be able to tell people what you decided and why, and hopefully you've considered all your options. It's a really difficult thing. Transparency. At what level do you have it? I mean, obviously, we shouldn't be like live streaming everybody's workstation over at NASA. That doesn't seem like the right level of transparency.
A little too much. That'd be a lot. That would be a lot of streaming.
Yeah,
a lot of boring PowerPoint presentations. We're like, come on, why are you showing me this? But, yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for participating.